All right, everyone should have been asked if it's okay to record. Beautiful. Well, welcome all of you to the first Bliss Talk of 2023. This is the second official Bliss Talk. I am Krista Hammerbacher Hoppala. I'm a consciousness design leader and an author. And if you've never heard the phrase consciousness design before, that makes a lot of sense because I needed to create a phrase that describes how I've been working with clients since 2005 and even before, but that's the official timeline there. And I'm really grateful that you are all here. This particular Bliss, well, let me talk about the Bliss Talks in general first. The Bliss Talks for me were inspired by the fact that I love the work that I do with clients behind closed doors. But it's just that it's behind closed doors and it's a very powerful relationship that I love so much. And I was starting to feel this pull, this gravitational pull toward getting some of those messages or as many as possible outside from behind the closed doors of working with clients. Because so much of consciousness design is about the applied aspect of living your life in such a way that you are truly living awake, you are truly conscious. And my particular bent around consciousness design, my flavor, if you will, is pleasure illuminated, meaning pleasure is not accidental. Bliss is the energetic analog, or pleasure is the earthly analog to bliss. It connects us to what makes us feel in our highest vibration. And if you're aware of the map of consciousness, Dr. David Hawkins' work, if you're not, it's a great place to have a bit of awareness when I'm talking about consciousness and what that means. Bliss is a very high vibrational consciousness, and it's not a linear process. We're not here and then we climb the ladder and we climb the ladder and we climb the ladder. We're all over the place all the time. But our intention with energy first in pleasure illuminated consciousness design is to recognize that, again, pleasure is not accidental. Pleasure reminds us about our path and what will feel the most easeful, the most aligned, and what it serves, our path serves what we are here to do. So this is when we can get into that purpose-driven energy and that kind of language. But what I invite you into around consciousness design is it's deeper and broader than that. And so I'd love to start this particular Bliss Talk, which is about aligning your life for flow. And the reason I chose that for the second Bliss Talk is because those phrases, those words, aligning and flowing, are really so foundational to consciousness design that I've even named my visioning sessions align and flow sessions. Because ultimately, what we're talking about when we talk about consciousness design is listening to our holistic wisdom. So I'm going to run through these three primary facets of consciousness design as I define it. And then we're going to move into some more experiential as we talk about aligning and flowing. And that experiential will be personal to you. So no one's going to get called out in any way. Obviously, if you're listening to this back later, I don't have access to you. I'm not going to come in a time machine and force you to answer these questions. This is for you to be the experiment, to explore, always in your sovereignty. So in no way am I here to move you in a direction that doesn't feel aligned for you. In fact, I'm inviting you to open into what does feel most aligned for you. You're the expert in your life where that's concerned. So please take all of this as an invitation. Resistance includes wisdom. We'll talk about that. So don't hesitate to feel the feels and go, I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if that really connects with how I think and feel in the world. And it's like, great. That confrontation, that provocation moves you in the direction of experimentation. So let's play with that. So please know that your truth is valid here as well. And in addition to that, being in that energy and that open-hearted, intuitive wisdom, holistic wisdom invites you to examine those corners that are less examined, because that's what consciousness design is most about, is bringing you to a state of greater enlightenment. Whether for you that is a very spiritual path, or for you that just means you want to feel a little bit lighter, enlightened in your day-to-day, that is perfectly appropriate. And that is your particular flavor of consciousness design. And that is valid. So, a couple of facets about consciousness design before we start talking about aligning and flowing. The first primary facet that I want to offer, you've already heard me share, which is consciousness design is holistic in the sense that it invites the wisdom of the 4 dimensions of the human experience. So we live in a world that is, perfectly speaking, here in the Western world, since I'm talking to folks all over the globe here, it's very affected and influenced and built upon patriarchal values. And part of that, in just noticing that, is that means that there is a privilege of the cognitive. Rigid, linear, logical, prove it to me, show it to me. This is the only thing that can be true. And my invitation to you is to recognize that can be incredibly useful. Science is important. Rigid, linear, logical functioning is important and has its place. But when we overprivilege that, and then we don't listen to the 3 other facets of wisdom, or sources of wisdom, or facets of the human experience, then we're missing out on wisdom. So let's invite that brain wisdom, that cognitive wisdom that we get rewarded with in this culture. That's perfectly appropriate. And for those of us who've felt really successful in that realm, awesome. Take that with you. Know that's a strength. And invite in the wisdom, the holistic wisdom, including your body's wisdom, how it feels in your body when you hear certain phrases or topics, or when what we'll do in a few minutes here is really noticing how flow feels in your body or constriction feels in your body, and being able to get curious about that. Our body isn't just willy-nilly, randomly responding. There's wisdom in that. And especially knowing that our subconscious speaks in symbol, that goes hand in hand with our body's wisdom that shows up, where we might say, oh gosh, I'm feeling this tightness in my chest, or I'm feeling this tightness in my hips. Okay, let's notice that. When does that show up? It can be a very physical component to your human existence, but it may have some wisdom. So let's just notice that that's a possibility and get curious about that dimension. So that's the physical dimension in addition to the cognitive dimension. The next dimension is our heart-centered wisdom, our emotion. And that dimension we tend to, in this culture, push aside as irrational, or as it doesn't have value because it just comes upon us. And what I invite you into is, yes, it is irrational, and that's perfectly okay. And yes, it does overwhelm us sometimes. That is also perfectly okay. And that is wisdom too. And so we're going to definitely tap into that heart-centered wisdom, in addition to that bodily wisdom, in addition to that cognitive wisdom that tends to take the lead. And lastly, the 4th dimension of the human experience here and source of wisdom is energetic wisdom, this noticing of our intuitive wisdom, these hits of peace, or just knowing that we go, I have no idea where that came from, but I'm going to take that into consideration. So the invitation here isn't to abandon how you design your consciousness already. The invitation is to get curious about how you can design your consciousness to encompass more holistic wisdom. And then it's up to you to filter it through yourself and decide what aligns and flows for you. So that's the first facet of consciousness design that's important to notice as we move through the rest of this conversation. There's also a recognition of energy first. that our intention is a real source of energy. And you'll hear me say often that consciousness is self-organizing. Now, that doesn't mean we just go hands off the wheel and go on autopilot. What that means is our intention sets this pervasive and infused energy, and it's there in the subconscious. So it's there, and we may not say, I'm making this decision because of this cognitive reason. But when we set an intention, we're subconsciously aligning with that intention, whether we even notice it or not. So energy first is about recognizing that when you set an intention, it still takes work. Don't get me wrong. Still takes focus. Attention goes with intention hand in hand. However, that intention can create this phenomenon of whether it's that infusive, pervasive wisdom that we're not quite noticing, but we know it's there, or it can feel like a beacon, like the light at the end of the tunnel, or a North Star, where we say, oh, this is the intention. Because what we need to notice is sometimes that path, that even though it's energy first, it's not going to be a straight line. It's not going to be this linear path toward exactly precisely what you want when you want. And we're going to talk about that when we talk more about alignment. And lastly, you'll also hear me say often, we're all mirrors and messengers for one another. So another facet of consciousness design, along with holistic wisdom and inviting in the 4 dimensions of the human experience, along with energy first, is that we're all mirrors and messengers for one another, which means every human, every relationship that you have in your life, even the fleeting ones at the grocery store, at the coffee shop, at the book club, they're there to have an alchemy, to align, to show up with whatever it is that might be that next gem for you to align to. Now, it may be also something that you want to step back away from or move away from, like, oh, I don't want more of that. I want less of that energy in my life. And so those mirrors and messengers are there to provide information. And when we're more agile and open to listening, sensing, knowing, feeling, seeing how this information comes in, we then filter it through ourselves. In no way are they telling us what to do. In no way are these human beings giving us instructions, because all of that is sourced from within. And so you might notice that in this mirrors and messengers phenomenon, that you have an experience and you say, whoa, that person really just doesn't feel aligned for me. That see, my language comes in right away. That person really set me off. So then we go, oh, instead of that person being in our life for a reason, that person is in our life for us to create meaning. And what is that meaning that you can create from that experience? And oftentimes, again, that's sourced from within. That's always sourced from within, in fact, but it can be this alchemy of what's happening without is a mirror of what is happening within. And so the invitation there is to just notice that and to say, you know, what's deeper than that? What meaning is there for me in this interaction? And again, that's the human experience of mirrors and messengers. So it can be very playful. It can be very, you know, we bring in some curiosity there and say, what meaning is there for me? And to the extent that you want to make meaning where there's meaning or not. So for some of us, that's this notion of, oh, that was a sign that I met that person, or we noticed synchronicities. You can take that as deep as you want to go. You can follow from synchronicity to synchronicity, or you can say, oh, that's one weird, funny thing that happened. I'm going to notice that, and I'm going to align with that energy. So those are 3 facets of consciousness design, just primary facets. There's more to it than that. But I wanted to create that foundation for you all to recognize that consciousness design is not just interpersonal, it's also transpersonal, meaning including the collective. And it's about creating meaning for yourself. So letting go of right and wrong, good or bad, really bringing yourself out of positionality and really staying in the curiosity. One of my phrases that I love to use is, that's really interesting. That's interesting. That's not good. That's not bad. I don't know how that fits in or aligns for me yet, but I'm going to notice it and I'm going to see what's deeper in that. And then I may or may not choose to take action. And that's the beautiful thing, is we always have our power of choice. So let's take a moment. Let's launch in here into some more experiential, or the rest of the moments perhaps. Let's launch into some experiential around the specifics of what, when I'm talking about in consciousness design, alignment and flow, and why those two are connected, and really the mythology around what I like to playfully phrase, the cult of good vibes, because we can't have the lights without the darkness. We can't have the light without the shadow. So we need to invite the good vibes and the hard vibes and recognize that it all has value. It all can move us toward our enlightenment, toward a greater alignment with self, because that includes radical honesty as well. So a little bit more about consciousness design there. What I want to offer is this particular Bliss Talk was inspired by this quotation by Albert Einstein. And if you saw some on socials, you may have seen this quotation, but I'd love to share it with you all now, because it really is powerful for me to notice that one of the mind-blowing, reality bending or reality defining physicists in our culture, in our awareness, said, when you examine the lives of the most influential people who've ever walked among us, you discover, cheat sheet, you discover one thread that winds through them all. They have been aligned first with their spiritual nature, and only then with their physical selves. Now, that's a physicist sharing this notion of energy first. They align with their physical selves, only then do they tend to their physical selves. Now, my invitation is we can do it all at once, everything everywhere all at once. There's something to that. There's a lot to that. And so we don't have to pick one and then do that and then do this. It's all connected. So what I offer is, when we're tending to our energetic or spiritual selves, that is where we tend to notice alignment first, or misalignment. And so what I want to offer as we talk about this alignment that Albert Einstein mentioned in that quotation is that when we honor the fact that we are only energy, that when we honor the fact that truly from a physics perspective, if we look at the holographic nature of humanity, it all comes down to the same pieces as space, as biological materials on other planets, as. Now, on the level that we're thinking about it, we're like, oh, but it's different elements in these things. Think deeper, think deeper, think deeper, think deeper. We're all made up of energy and mostly empty space, which is interesting. So that can really challenge our brains, our cognitive, because we go, what am I even supposed to do with that, Krista? What am I even supposed to do with that? And my invitation to you is just sit with it, just notice it and go, interesting. What might I do when I consider aligning in my life by starting with energy first and then letting things follow from that? And so I'll pause there to just have you notice that some of consciousness design and some of this concept of aligning and flowing is going to take that leap of faith of, I don't know what I don't know. And so there is an element here of making this your own and filtering this through what feels right for you, or right meaning aligned, not right or wrong. And if you want to go to right and wrong, that's okay too, but I'll keep inviting you back into curiosity. So when we're talking about alignment is an interesting notion, because alignment, from my perspective in consciousness design, comes from the place of noticing first typically in our energy or in a way that we can't usually describe. Sometimes it comes hand in hand with emotion. Sometimes our bodies are there giving us information as well. Oh, it just doesn't feel, oh, it doesn't, just something doesn't feel right about this. Okay, let's notice that. And then sometimes our cognitive might come in and say, oh, I see there are some reasons here why this might not feel aligned. So you notice how, as we consider how we feel, how it feels in our body, in our hearts, in our energy, and in our mind, we're starting to assemble this notion of what it feels to be aligned or what it feels to like to be misaligned. And typically speaking, when we're talking about misalignment, again, it's not right or wrong. It's on the path or not quite on the path. So I want to invite you to recognize, again, I'll bring you back to some pleasure illuminated notions here, that's why when I use that phrase pleasure illuminated, it's to remind us that when we allow that to be how it feels to be on our path, and we're talking about the deep pleasure here, the bliss, the life affirming energy, that it doesn't always feel great. It'll feel aligned, but it's sometimes going to feel really hard to be in alignment. And so that's one myth I want to bust about this idea of when we align that it's good vibes only. So once we hit the path, we're on the path, we're off to the races, awesome. Life is going to be smooth sailing from here on out. No, that is not at all what I'm saying about alignment, because that brings us back into this rigid, linear, logical, once I'm here, I'm done, check it off. I'm enlightened, I've ascended, I'm aligned, I can go on autopilot now. The invitation of alignment is life is a practice, and you're going to be constantly, consistently, and in your presence, moving and shaken with all of this information from these 4 dimensions of the human experience. And so it's an invitation to stay awake in your living, live awake. Alignment can feel hard in alignment. And I'll use an example here from my lived experience, which, often makes me smile, is I had a real challenging time existing in the academic environment of my graduate program, but it felt aligned. And so in those times when I was like, I'm done with this, with you, with this paper, I don't even feel how this fits in, but I knew that graduate school itself felt aligned. So I did the things. I commuted and I worked all the jobs and I did all the things. And I knew somehow, some way in my essence, that when I use essence, I'm talking about those 4 dimensions of self. In my essence, I knew that that was my path. And there were parts of it that felt really challenging, but I knew that that was the path. And so I knew that was aligned. So I just bring you back to recognizing that sometimes alignment is going to be challenging. Sometimes it will be that smooth sailing. But alignment is about feeling at peace and in that intuitive wisdom of, oh, that knowing. And so I invite you to recognize right now for yourselves. I'm going to invite you into just a very brief experience here, wherever you are on the planet, whatever time you're watching this, or as we are here together, to notice just in your awareness, in your consciousness, how it's felt for you when you have noticed that you've been in alignment, whatever that means for you right now. So I invite you to call into your consciousness a time where you're like, all right, this feels like the path. I feel like I'm moving forward in a way that feels consistent or congruent with who I am and what I want. So just notice that. And notice as you call that into your consciousness, how that feels in your body, how that feels in your energy. And again, this is a memory, but it's going to call up those same feelings. So just feel that. And just notice what's going on in your body, what's going on in your mind and your cognition, how your emotion feels. You might even decide to tune into your energy here and notice that as well. And just notice how it feels. You might describe it to yourself. I felt at peace. My body feels at ease. I don't feel heavy. I feel light, or I feel just grounded, or emotionally, I feel exhilarated. Like, yeah, whatever that is, just notice it. And now we're going to juxtapose that with a time in your life. It could even be now, but a time in your life where you were like, this is not the path. I made a choice right here, right now. It does not feel aligned. So just call up, and this can be a very mundane choice. This can be a big, huge life decision. Just notice in your body, in your energy, in your emotion, or your cognitive language, what it feels like to feel misaligned. And this is just a taster. So just play with it. Just notice. You might feel tightness in your chest, constriction. You might notice your shoulders shrink in. You might notice you feel like a little bit maybe lost or frustrated or resentful. Lower vibrational energy, feels less expansive. It feels closed in, maybe not being able to see other choices, because that feeling of misalignment really can feel as immersive as, or sometimes even more so than, the feeling of alignment. And so just notice what that is for you. And what I invite you into is, neither of those feelings or experiences are wrong. They're just information. And so we can live misaligned and still be living awake, because we're not using our power of choice to come into flow. So I invite you into recognizing that how that felt in your body and your energy is growing your own self-intimacy with how alignment feels in your body, and therefore how flow will feel in your body as well. So just take that as a taster, play with that in your day-to-day, and also notice when you felt that energy of misalignment. Notice that we often will construct our own barriers to why we can't come into alignment. So Christopher Ryan, who wrote the book Sex at Dawn, and the other one that's escaping me right now, Civilized to Death. I love one of his quotations, which is, the human species is the only species that lives in zoos of their own making. So notice, wow, we're setting our own limitations around the misalignment. We might rationalize it and say, this is my only choice right now. We might say, well, I deserve to feel misaligned. We might. So you might notice right now the self-talk, or the voices, the aspects of self that show up as barriers. Now, we also have circumstantial barriers, life, the reality, all very true. And in no way am I asking you to say you can flip a switch into alignment and it's a done deal. It is a practice. Life is a practice. So my invitation, when you feel that energy of misalignment, is to then go deeper into, what's stopping me from becoming aligned? What's stopping me from the choices to come into alignment? And my invitation to you there is, a lot of those can be really real. And this might take some time, because the cosmic order is the cosmic order. And so sometimes we're moving really big gears here. And so we need to sit in that knowing of, I am making moves. I'm aligning my energy, my frequency with this path to move away from that static, that dissonance, that discomfort that is information. It's information. It's not there to punish us. It's there to teach us. And so when we can flip the script on that and say, oh, fear is an ally, dissonance is there as information. When we can do that, we set ourselves free from the energetic black holes of guilt, shame, self-judgment, shoulds, external locus of control, goodies of like should. When we set ourselves free from that and just take that as part and parcel of the decision, and we factor it in, we're not going to reject it. We're just going to say, oh yeah, this is my reality. But what's the one thing that I can do to align myself to feel more in that peace, in that knowing? And one of the invitations around alignment is, that greater intimacy with what intuitive wisdom feels like in your essence. It may speak loudest through your body. It may speak loudest through your emotion. It may speak loudest through your energy. It may even speak loudest through your cognition. It may, because you're translating your intuitive wisdom and very agile that way. But just invite yourself to notice that we are constructing our own barriers often to why we can't come back into alignment. Sometimes we get habituated to feeling that dissonance, and it can be that simple. Shake it up, little radical discontinuity. I don't want to feel this anymore. What can I do to be the experiment? What's the instead here? So that brings us then to when we're talking about flow. So we align. I always use the analogy here. It's very visceral for many of us, of a kinked hose. So if you're dragging the hose, you're trying to water the plants, you're washing your car, whatever you're doing, drinking out of the hose, hooking it up to the sprinkler, whatever you're doing, the hose is kinked, and you're like, there's not a lot of water coming out of this hose. Okay, so where is it misaligned? So we're going to do some examination, some exploration. I'm going to find where in the hose this flow is kinked, because it wants to flow. It wants to flow. And so being in that energy of recognizing that the relationship of alignment to flow is an allowing. It's an allowing. I'm going to let this flow and see what happens. But that requires us to transmute those barriers. Transmute those barriers from this is wrong, this is the dissonance of this is wrong, this is bad, this isn't the right path, to, oh yeah, there is something misaligned here. So how can I move myself into greater awareness of my alignment? And that means that dissonance is going to start to fade, but we have to go into it first. We have to look into that dissonance and say, what's the fear here? What's under this barrier? What is the consciousness gift here of what I need to, I don't love the word work, but what I need to tend to in myself to loosen myself into the place of being able to allow flow. And what I offer you is, in that case, that's transmutation. That we say, okay, here's this fear, here's this barrier, whatever it is that's popping up that's not allowing you to align, we're going to move through that as a portal, as a door, to say, okay, what's the need behind that? Because the guidance is there. The guidance is there, but most of us stop at the fear, because we say, oh, fear means I need to step back away. Evolutionarily, sure, that makes sense. If you've got the saber-toothed tiger right there about to chomp you, yeah, back away. What I invite you into is that's not the use of fear these days. We need to move and shake with the evolution of our human experience and say, oh, I can handle this differently. I can go in, eyes wide open, look that fear in the eye and say, what do you got for me? What do I need to do to move this fear into power, into fuel, to say, I feel misaligned, and this discomfort is my fuel. I'm transmuting it into the power to move into alignment. And so we're talking very meta here. What I want to invite you into again here is your own body, your own energy, your own emotion, and your own cognition here, to notice. Now, again, this is bringing yourself into just this taster experience of what you might do in your own practice, in your own devotion, in your own living around that transmuting. And so I just invite you to notice right now, again, it can be very mundane or grand. Just notice right now something in your life that doesn't feel like it's flowing, a circumstance that just doesn't feel like it's flowing for you right now. So you might feel those similar energies of what it felt like to feel misaligned earlier in this talk. And just notice that. And then invite yourself into that feeling with curiosity. And the question would be for yourself, what do I need here to do, to shift, to invite in? What do I need to do to feel like this discomfort is wisdom? What do I need to do for myself to open my mind, my heart, my energy, and even my body to recognizing that this discomfort is telling me something? Then I can transmute that into action, which then allows us to feel truly in our power. And oftentimes that transmutation of, oh, there's one thing I can do right now. I can have fewer conversations with that person, or I can change my work hours, or I can stop buying the coffee that I buy every day and save that money for something else because deeper down, I really want to go to Hawaii. Whatever it is, you just notice that and let it be real. Let it be real that that discomfort is pointing you in the direction of the one thing or the many things, if we continue the practice, you can do to sometimes a quantum leap. Boom, you're in alignment. That's always possible in consciousness design, or it's incremental. It's making these small choices that then are bringing you into the feeling of power. Wow, I can do something about that, because that's the applied version. That's the applied version of consciousness design. My invitation to you is, I don't want you just thinking about it and feeling it. I want you doing something with it. I want you shaping your life with it. That is what consciousness design ultimately is all about, is creating that alignment. So then what happens is, not only are we habituating, bringing into our bodies the desire, the craving, the neural pathways that support this experimentation, this curiosity without fear, but we're also getting used to transmuting that fear or that becomes information into a doing. That's the transmutation that I invite you into that makes the difference in consciousness design. It's not just there to sit on a shelf. It's there to be read, to be dealt with, to be used as a roadmap, as a blueprint, whatever that is. And so my invitation to you now is to notice that when you come into alignment, little by little, piece by piece, aspect of self by aspect of self, oftentimes I'll hear clients say, I'm really energetic. That feels a little bit too easy. I don't understand why it's just flowing. And then, of course, something else will pop up and there'll be some dissonance and you'll have to go into that practice. But again, when we bring ourselves into recognizing energy first, getting used to setting intentions, circling back to the beginning, and also connecting that to this exploration, this practice of exploration and curiosity to get the information, to allow ourselves to let it feel easy, to let it feel pleasurable, to let it lead us to bliss, then the flow starts to happen. And then that becomes our baseline. Do, 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 do. Little bit of alignment, little bit of enlightenment, little bit of consciousness raising, little bit of noticing, wow, I feel more expanded, more spacious, more generous with self, more compassionate, more interested in the options, more interested in being the experiment to say, there are infinite possibilities. And some of them don't feel good when I think about them, and some of them feel awesome. So I'm going to focus my energy here by setting the intention that this is aligned to bring me precisely the information I need to flow. So my invitation to you, lastly, is in this, there's also an invitation into archetypal energy, meaning these profiles of energy. My favorite one is a big surprise. It's Wonder Woman. She could be the warrior, she could be the queen. Look at those archetypal energies, those energies that exist as inspiration that we can inhabit and embody, that is closest to how you feel when you're in flow. So that's just a fun, playful experimentation. For some of us, when we feel in flow, we feel like the king or the queen. We're like, yes, I'm on top of the world and this is all for me. For some of us, when we're in flow, we feel like the warrior. We're like, yes, I'm out there. I'm getting it done. I'm honoring myself. I'm really listening to my own discernment. For some of us, That archetypal energy can be a person in our life or someone we admire, and we look at their life path and we say, wow, I really appreciate how they interacted with their values. I really appreciate how they made their ethics in action, the foundation of how they made their choices. And we can't see behind the curtain of everyone's choices, but we can use that archetypal energy to recenter us into the practice of allowing flow and pursuing that alignment or allowing that alignment. So that's my invitation to you lastly, is to play with that. Have a good time with that archetypal energy, and it may shift and change. And so allow that to be the case. So invite yourself into just noticing what's the energy that holds you up and supports you in staying consistent and present with this practice of curiosity, of aligning and flowing. So that's my last invitation to you before we take a break and have some Q&A, some conversation for those of us who are here in person synchronously. And I'm so grateful you're here. My last invitation to you, though, is to remember that the entire basis of all of this is recognizing your own sovereignty, recognizing your power of choice, that you are here in this space, or you are here listening or watching this Bliss Talk because you decided to make it happen. Done deal. No other reason. No other reason. You said yes, and you followed your yes energy, and here we are. And so that is the power of choice that I invite you to inhabit and embody over and over and over again, even when it's challenging, even when you feel misaligned, because feeling misaligned is simply an invitation to get curious, listen, see, feel, know, sense that path, and bring yourself closer and closer to it, to then relax and ease yourself into flow until you need to get more clear in your practice again. So please know, again, it's not a set it and forget it. This is an invitation to live awake in every moment and to reclaim that energy that tends to just fall away when we're not truly calling it in and owning it through our very clear power of choice. So my invitation lastly to you is to play with aligning and flowing and how it feels to you in your life. So the way I've described it here in these little tasters are invitations into self-intimacy around what your alignment feels like, what your misalignment feels like, and what it feels like to allow and surrender into flow. And play with that. I invite you to reach out. If you feel called to, you can always email me at krista@theblissmystic.com. I invite you lastly into the next Bliss Talk. I will keep you posted on when those are going to happen. If you are here, you are on my list, my mind food list. So thank you for that. You can pay attention to those invitations. I will continue to have Bliss Talks for you. And I'm having so much fun with that wherever you are on the planet. And especially for those Aussie folks, I am aware that synchronously, we're going to find a time that we can all gather across the planet because the synchronous is a lot of fun. I also invite you into, if you are a person who feels called to and really embodied in the space of this where sacred feminine is centered, I also have my Rebel Queen Circle, which I have so much fun. It is my medicine, is your medicine, is our medicine. It's a monthly group that is my sacred service. So the only fee for that is that you pay your gifts forward. And there is a Facebook group. If you go to theblissmystic.com to the LinkedIn, you can find your way to that Facebook group. Again, we meet monthly. Our next group is this Sunday, the 22nd, if you happen to be seeing this synchronously or in the next few days. And we are going to be actualizing our sacred bitch. So we're going to really dive into what power feels like, especially the power that's disavowed or been disavowed by our culture, particularly for those who thrive in those sacred feminine spaces. So those are my invitations to you. Lastly, I'll share the new book is out, Conscious Revolution. I'm really excited about my offering in that book around aligning and flowing with your own pleasure revolution. So have a great time with that as well. well, and I'd love to hear any thoughts or reflections that you happen to have. This is meant to be a connection, not just an interaction. I appreciate the dialogue, even if it's asynchronous. So I'm grateful to every single one of you who is here in person, and you can stick around. We'll do some chatting. I am grateful to every single one of you who have watched this recording back while you're folding laundry, while you're driving to work. Beautiful job to live awake and give yourself really delicious mind food as you're moving about your life. So thank you all so much. Again, my name is Krista Hammerbacher Hoppala. You can find me on Instagram at the Bliss Mystic and also at Krista.writes, as well as on Facebook at Krista.writes. You can write me again at Krista at theblissmystic.com. So be well, keep rocking, and I'll see you next time.